The morning of my wedding, I stood alone in the church hallway and listened to the organ start playing. My maid of honor, Celine, squeezed my hand and said, "You ready?" And I nodded, because what else do you say when the answer is complicated? There was no father, no mother, no brother sitting in the third pew on the left where I had imagined them for years. Just 64 chairs, half of them filled with my husband's family and our friends from work, and a gap on my side that felt loud in a way I can't fully explain even now. I walked myself down that aisle, shoulders back, chin up, the way they teach you to carry yourself when you wear a uniform, when you represent something bigger than your own feelings. I had spent 4 years as a U.S. Army military police officer, and I knew how to hold a face steady when everything underneath it was breaking. So that's what I did. I married the man I loved in front of everyone who showed up, and I didn't cry until I was in the car. Let me back up, because none of this makes sense without the years before it. My father is the kind of man who believes that love and control are the same thing. He never said that out loud, obviously. He said things like, "I only want what's best for you, and you'll thank me one day." And a family that doesn't consult each other isn't really a family. He said these things the way some people quote scripture, like they settled every argument before it started. I was the oldest of 3. My brother, who I'll call my brother because that's all he is to me right now, was the golden one. My younger sister, Penny, the only one in my family I still talk to, was the quiet one who survived by disappearing into her room. And I was the difficult one, the one who asked too many questions, the one who got a 4.0 and then joined the army instead of the college my father had already paid the deposit for. That was the first rupture. He didn't speak to me for 8 months after I enlisted. My mother, who loved me but could never love me louder than she feared him, called every few weeks and whispered updates like she was passing notes in class. "Your father is coming around. He wasn't. He's proud of you. He just doesn't know how to say it. He wasn't." He was furious, and everyone in the house was managing him, and I was 2 states away, learning how to qualify on a rifle and feeling, for the first time in my adult life, like I could breathe. I served 6 years total. I came home to Virginia with a rank, a commendation, and a clear understanding of what I would and would not accept from people who claimed to love me. That's where I met Theo. He was a contractor doing security assessments for the base. Not military, but he understood that world the way civilians who've been around it long enough sometimes do. With respect and without romanticism. He was funny. He cooked real food. He listened when I talked about hard things without trying to immediately fix them. We dated for 2 years before he asked me to marry him, and I said yes before he finished the sentence. I called my father to tell him. The conversation lasted 11 minutes. I know because I was standing in my kitchen and I watched the clock the whole time. He asked who Theo's family was. I told him. He asked about Theo's income. I gave him a general answer. He asked if Theo was the reason I hadn't come home for Christmas the past 2 years. I said no. The real reason was that being home felt like walking through a minefield in shoes I couldn't run in, but I didn't say that out loud. I said we had both been busy. Then he said, "A wedding is a family decision. We need to be included in the planning." I said, "I'd love your input, Dad." What I meant was, I will listen to what you say and then I will do what Theo and I have already decided. He heard what I meant. He always did. The calls became interrogations. What venue? What date? Why that date? Who's on the guest list? Why is her name on the list? You know how I feel about her. Have you talked to Father Benedetti at St. Michael's? Because that's where Hargroves get married. My name isn't Hargrove anymore, I said once. It was a mistake. We didn't speak for 3 weeks. My mother relayed his position like a diplomat from a country I was slowly deciding not to visit anymore. He felt disrespected. He felt excluded. He had built everything so that his family would stay together, and I was dismantling it piece by piece. I want to be fair here, because this is a true story and I'm trying to tell it honestly. My father did not have an easy life. He grew up with nothing, built himself up from nothing, and the way he expressed love was by building walls around the people he cared about and calling the walls protection. He genuinely believed he was doing right by us. I think that's true. I also think it doesn't excuse what he did. 3 weeks before the wedding, my brother called me, not to ask how I was doing, not to say he was excited to be there. He called to tell me he couldn't make it. "Dad's not going," he said, like that explained everything. "And Mom, you know how she is, she won't come without him." I sat down on the floor. I don't know why the floor, I just couldn't stand up anymore. "And you?" I asked. A pause. "It's complicated, Maura." "And you?" I asked. A pause. "It's complicated, Maura." Maura. That's my name. I should say that. I'm Maura, and I was sitting on my kitchen floor 3 weeks before my wedding, being told by my family that they had decided, collectively, quietly, without me, not to come. "He's your father too," my brother said, and I understood then that this was the reason, not distance, not scheduling. Loyalty. They were choosing sides, and they had already chosen. I didn't beg. That's the one thing I can say for myself. I did not beg. I said, "Okay, I'll see you when I see you." And I hung up, and I called Celine, and I cried for about 40 minutes, and then I washed my face and I went to bed. Theo held me that night and said, "We could postpone. We could give them more time." I said, "No, I'm not rewarding this." We got married on a Saturday in October. The leaves were turning. The church smelled like old wood and candles. 64 people watched me walk down that aisle alone, and every single one of them was someone who had chosen to be there. That has to count for something. I kept telling myself that. It did count. It just also hurt. The text came 6 weeks later. Not from my father. He never texted, thought it was undignified. But from my mother, which meant it was from him. "Your brother's wedding is April 14th. Your father would like you to contribute $6,000 toward the venue deposit. It would mean a lot to the family." I read it 3 times. $6,000. From the daughter who had gotten married 6 weeks ago without a single member of her family present. For the son whose wedding they had all enthusiastically shown up for. For a deposit on a venue they had already chosen. For a date they had already set. For an event they had already planned. Without asking me, without including me, and after making it very clear that my own wedding was beneath their attendance, Theo came into the kitchen and saw my face and said, "What happened?" I showed him the text. He read it. Then he read it again. Then he put the phone down very carefully on the counter and said, "What do you want to do?" That's what I love about him. He didn't tell me what to do. He asked what I wanted. What I wanted was to throw something. What I did was sit down and think about it for 48 hours, because I had learned, in the Army, in 6 years of working with people under pressure, that the responses you send in the first 48 hours are rarely the ones you want to live with. On the 3rd day, I sent a Venmo transfer for $1. In the memo line, I wrote, "With love, Maura and Theo." Then I blocked the number. Theo saw what I did and laughed for a long time. Not a mean laugh. That's my wife laugh. I'm not proud of the pettiness, but I'm not entirely ashamed of it either. There's a version of me that would have written a long, careful email explaining my reasoning. That version had tried. Repeatedly. For years. She had gotten nowhere. I thought that was the end of it. It was not the end of it. It was a Tuesday in February, 4 months after the wedding, when I came home to find Theo standing in the living room with a look I had never seen on his face before. "2 police officers came to the door," he said. I stopped walking. "What?" "About an hour ago. They said your father filed a report." He paused. "He says you stole jewelry from your parents' home." He gave them a list. The room did something strange. The walls stayed where they were, but the air changed. I think I put my bag down on the couch. I think I sat down. I'm not entirely sure. "He filed a police report," I said. "Yes." "He said I stole jewelry, a pearl necklace and 2 rings. He said they belonged to your grandmother. I knew exactly which necklace he was talking about. My grandmother, his mother, had given it to me herself the summer before she died, when I was 22 and home on leave. She had put it in my hands and said, "This is yours now, Maura. Don't let anyone tell you different." I had been wearing it at my wedding. It was in the top drawer of my dresser, 30 feet from where I was sitting. I also knew what this was. This wasn't about jewelry. This was about the $1. Or about the wedding. Or about every conversation I had refused to lose for the past 6 years. He had found something that looked like leverage, and he was using it. I called an attorney friend from the base. She told me what to do: locate the jewelry, document it, get a statement from anyone who witnessed my grandmother's gift if possible, and respond to the officers in writing through her office. It took 4 days to get everything together. During those 4 days, I slept badly and ate worse, and Theo drove me to work every morning because I didn't trust myself behind the wheel. I felt something I hadn't felt since I was a kid in that house, like I had done something wrong, like I was in trouble. It took me a while to recognize that feeling, and when I did, I got angry, and the anger was actually helpful. I had done nothing wrong. I knew where I stood. I just needed the law to know it too. My attorney sent a formal response. We included a photograph of me wearing the necklace at my wedding, time-stamped, and a letter from my aunt, my grandmother's only surviving sibling, who confirmed she had been present the day my grandmother gave it to me. We also included a brief statement of my own. The police closed the inquiry. No charges, no further contact. My father did not apologize. My mother sent a text through a cousin I barely knew. He was upset. You know how he gets. Maybe you could call him. I did not call him. I thought, this is the part where the story ends, where I build my life on the other side of this wall and eventually stop wondering what's on their side of it. I had accepted that. I was ready for that. But I hadn't counted on Penny. My sister called on a Thursday night, and I knew from the first word she said that something was different. Not her. She sounded like herself. Something else. He had a heart attack, she said. 2 days ago. He's stable, but Maura, it's bad. I drove to the hospital. I don't know why, exactly. I had many hours of highway to figure it out, and I still couldn't tell you. Some part of me just needed to be in the building. Some part of me was not ready to be the person who stayed home. He was awake when I came in. Smaller than I remembered, which surprised me even though I knew it shouldn't. He had an IV and a monitor and a look on his face that I had never seen before. Something open. Something stripped of whatever he usually kept in front of his eyes. We didn't say the things I had prepared. We didn't have the conversation I had scripted in my head 100 times over 100 different highways. He said, "You came." I said, "Yes." He said, "I didn't think you would." I said, "I almost didn't." He was quiet for a while. The monitor beeped. He was quiet for a while. The monitor beeped. Someone in the hallway laughed at something. Then he said, "I don't know how to do this differently." I wanted to say, "I know." I wanted to say, "That's not good enough." Both were true. I said neither, because sometimes the thing you have to do in the hardest moments is just hold space for what's actually happening instead of what you wish were happening. "You don't have to do anything differently right now," I said. "Just rest." He slept. I sat in the chair by the window for 2 hours, watching the parking lot, and then I drove home. He spent 12 days in the hospital and then came home to recover. I did not move in to help. My mother and brother handled that. Penny called me every few days with updates. He sent me a letter in March. Actual paper in an envelope with a stamp. The kind of letter that takes intention, that you can't undo once it's mailed. I'm not going to reproduce what it said, because those words belong to me and I'm still deciding what to do with them. What I will say is that it wasn't an apology in any form I would have recognized 5 years ago. It wasn't, "I'm sorry I was wrong. You were right." It was more like a man trying to explain himself in the only language he knew, which was still not a language I spoke fluently, but trying, for the first time, trying to reach across something he had spent decades building higher. I read it 4 times. I put it in the drawer with my grandmother's necklace. I didn't call him, but I didn't throw it away. Penny got engaged in September. She asked me to be her maid of honor, and I said yes before she finished the sentence, the same way I said yes to Theo. She asked me something else, too. Dad wants to walk me down the aisle, she said, but he wants to know if you'll be okay with that. He asked me to ask you. I held the phone for a moment. He asked her to ask me. That's not a big thing, by any normal measure. It's not a repaired relationship. It's not just a served or wrong made right or the movie version of forgiveness where everyone is healed. It was just, he thought of my feelings before acting. For maybe the first time in my memory. He thought about whether his choice would hurt me, and he wanted to know. Tell him yes, I said. Of course, yes. The wedding was on a Saturday in April. The azaleas were out, and the air smelled like grass, and my sister was so beautiful I cried from the moment I saw her in the dress. Our father walked her down the aisle slowly, which surprised me. He has always moved fast, like standing still means losing, and at the end, when he placed her hand in her groom's hand, he stopped and looked at her for a long moment before stepping back. I was watching from the altar. I saw his face. I don't have words for it exactly, but I recognized it, finally. What it had always been underneath all the control and the ultimatums and the police reports and the fury. It was just love. Big, clumsy, destructive, imperfectly expressed love that had no idea how to be what we needed it to be. I'm not ready to forgive everything. I may never be. There are things that happened that changed me permanently, and I don't think I owe anyone a version of healing that papers over the truth of that. But at the reception later, he found me near the bar. He was holding a glass of water. The heart thing meant he couldn't drink anymore. And he looked at me the way you look at something you've been avoiding making eye contact with. You look well, he said. I am well, I said. A pause. Theo treating you right? Yes, he's a good man. He nodded. He seemed to want to say more, and not know how. In the old days, that silence would have filled with something hard, something I'd have to brace against. This time, it just sat there between us, and neither of us tried to make it into something it wasn't. Okay, he said finally. Good. He walked away. I ordered a glass of wine. Celine appeared from nowhere the way she always does and said, "How are you doing?" And I had to think about it for a real moment before I answered. I don't know, I said, but I think I'm okay. She put her arm around me and we stood there watching my sister dance with her husband, and the band played something slow, and outside the windows the sky had gone that particular shade of blue it only gets on April evenings in the South. And I thought, this is not the story I would have written for myself. It's missing too many things and it hurt too much to get here, and I still don't have the ending I thought I deserved. But it's mine. Every part of it is mine. And I walked down my aisle alone, and I built my life on the other side, and I am still standing. That counts for something. I kept telling myself that. I still do. I used to think the hardest part of what happened was the wedding. Walking that aisle alone, holding my own arm, pretending my face wasn't doing what it wanted to do. But looking back now, the wedding wasn't the hardest part. The hardest part was the years before it. All the times I bent myself into something smaller to keep the peace, and the peace never came anyway. There's something I've come to understand about cause and effect that nobody teaches you when you're young. Because when you're young, you're still hoping the people who should love you correctly will eventually figure out how. What I know now is this. The way someone treats you in your worst moment tells you everything about who they are, and the way you respond tells you everything about who you're becoming. My father filed a police report over a necklace that my grandmother placed in my hands herself. He did that, not because he believed I was a thief, but because he needed a lever, and that was the one he found. And here's the thing about that kind of action. It doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from years of believing that the people you love are yours to control. That love is a transaction. that loyalty means obedience. He built that pattern brick by brick across decades, and when I stopped playing my assigned role, he reached for the only tools he knew. I don't say that to excuse him. I say it because understanding the cause is the only way to stop the cycle. What I did, sending that $1, calling my attorney, documenting the necklace, holding my ground, none of it felt brave in the moment. It felt terrifying and lonely and like I was doing something wrong even though I knew I wasn't. That feeling, that specific guilt that comes from finally protecting yourself, is one of the most disorienting things I've ever experienced. Because we're taught, especially as daughters, that keeping the family together is our job, that the cost of that peace should be paid by us, quietly, without complaint. Theo asked me once, early on, why I was so careful, why I waited 48 hours before responding to things, why I documented, why I never said the angriest version of what I was thinking. I told him because I was trained by a man who moved fast and hit hard and dealt with the wreckage later. I decided a long time ago I didn't want to live that way. That's the thing about growing up in a house built on control. You can absorb it or you can study it. You can become it or you can learn exactly what it costs. I chose to learn. That choice, made quietly and without applause, is the one I'm most proud of. Penny deserved a maid of honor who showed up whole. Theo deserved a wife who knew her own worth. I deserved, after everything, to stand at an altar in April and watch my sister be happy without it breaking me. None of that happened by accident. It happened because every time I was tested, when they didn't come, when they asked for money, when the police knocked on my door, I chose, slowly and imperfectly, to stay grounded in what I actually knew to be true. I am still learning how to do that. I expect I will be for a long time, but I walked down my aisle. I sent that $1. I kept the necklace, and I am still here.